Okay, so we now go to the Chair's report on page 8 through to 13. So I'm going to start with a bit of the review, I think, and then I'll move on to Housing Reserve after that. So it's quite a small team, but housing and city centre development and some of those legislative tools are actually pretty critical, especially when it comes to housing and livability, but also workability of our city. And so looking back, of course, we have had significant engagement with the community and adopted Te Ara o Whakatū, which is our city centre spatial plan. And this was a pretty significant, Alan's holding up a copy from the back, those on Zoom won't see that, but the engagement was fantastic. The engagement process, we had 4 months alone of pre-engagement, 81 meetings, a significant number of cups of tea and custard squares, I think it was. But it was about bringing people together on the journey and going, where do we need to be? How do we need to position ourselves? So that was quite a significant piece of work, which we see coming into play now with things like the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund and our desire to increase housing. And having a plan like that in place is quite critical. So that was a significant piece of work. A fun aside, but still actually pretty important, was the Riverside Pop-Up Park. And on the back of the public life survey, there was that real key identification that only, less than 2% of what we had in the CBD was children playing. And it needed to be a place for all people. And so the Riverside Youth Pop-Up Park next to our Materna Library was a key part of that. And of course, we've now bought the Bridge Street section, which may be used either for housing or for a play space. So, and of course, so that again ties into those key goals that we set early on. Upper Trafalgar Street, the catenary lights went in, and of course, despite a few hiccups, which were covered under the warranty system, not by ratepayers, look, they're a stunning addition to what has been a really successful project. And yes, it took some stops and starts, not in this term. So thank you to those in the previous term who got that going. But that is such a great example of pedestrianisation and of encouraging people into the city centre. Then we go into the housing area, and of course we did the engagement with the community over 42 Rutherford Street and 69 to 101 Achilles Ave, and the due diligence on that is still continuing. But aligned with that has been the significant work around the Intensification Acceleration Fund. And of course, our proposal, which is the water mains and wastewater pump station upgrade and related wastewater and stormwater upgrades, that application has gone into the negotiation stage. And having those other plans lined up has supported that. But the city centre development team, as little as it is, has put in just significant work on that. And then, of course, we had the Tautura Street properties, and they went through the Strategic Development and Property Subcommittee, and then the housing team were able to put out a request for proposal, and we now have a delivery, or will have delivery, of 6 new houses at such a critical spot, so close to facilities, schools, services, etc. And so that's really exciting. Intensification action plan. we get annual updates, and the next one comes to at the end of 2022. But I also just noted in 5.12 the thought I had around Community Action Nelson, being able to do, sort of similar regular communications like the Bicycle Nelson Bays ones. So it's just another way of supporting the community to see ideas and see exemplars from around the country or overseas. And so last time I spoke to them, Can said that they were meeting with our comms staff and later this month. So that will be exciting to see that. There's also a lot of work on statutory tools and initiatives, the MPSUD. We have the supplementary agenda item, so we'll come to that later. And then we get a full report, annual monitoring report at the end of the year. The housing and business capacity assessment was undertaken, which was no small feat. And then we did some rating changes as part of the LTP. So I will go back to the housing reserve, but since I'm going in this order, so long and thanks for all the fish. For those of you who didn't get that, that was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. But yeah, I do want to acknowledge, the work of Alan and Lisa, who are here, Chris Pawson, Maxine, Claire Barton, and I get reticent naming people because then you end up not naming someone that should have been named. So apologies. But I also know we've had a lot of support across the organisation, because everything we do in this subcommittee has a level of across council. And so thank you to all the staff that have supported this mahi on housing and on city centre. And thank you also to those consultants that have supported it as well. So just coming back to the housing reserve, of course, we've had, I'll start with section 3, which is just a restating requirement around these are the resolutions because they went straight to council. So that's just a restating of the resolutions that we made at that full council meeting of 25 August. And then we've had the phase 1 that Gabrielle oversaw with Lisa as well. And then we've since done the phase 2 and those contracts are underway. They're being written up as we speak. I had a conversation about them just yesterday. So that's in chain to get more houses again, which is very exciting. 4.4, I just thought we might like to have a conversation about where we go with the housing reserve, because in going through the status updates, there isn't actually an update on finishing the housing reserve or setting the criteria as yet, which I thought there was. So apologies for that. So I thought we can always deal with that at this meeting if need be and have a discussion on that. So look, just noting that Alan and Lisa are here, and so they will give an update on any items within their areas, and then you can ask any questions to them there. That's item 7 on the report. So just basically, if you've got any comments or questions about the work, historic work, and then any thoughts on the housing reserve. So I'll open for questions now. No questions. Okay, well then I will. Mel.
I won't let the opportunity go. Have we any idea what reserves are still in the fund, the housing reserve fund? What level of funding is there?
Yes, so there's 8.15 million. Our first tranche was 1.85. That was phase 1, and phase 2 we approved 2 million. So there is still 8.15. So I guess what I've said in section 4 is that when we considered both phase 1 and phase 2, one of the options that came up in the report and analysing the options was, well, we could just set the criteria, and instead of having sort of set phases, we could actually just have it open for applications. And then as they come in, because that is I guess a tension that has been raised through community housing providers, is that, you know, their availability on projects doesn't necessarily align with when we might put a phase out, and we'd be able to be more responsive as a council if once they were at a set phase with a project, they were able to come to us at the same time as they're then going to government and other entities, because of course it always supports that co-funding. And you'll see with the return on investment we've had, they're all based on significant co-funding from other parties, which is the whole benefit. You know, when you go, well, there was a 700% return on phase 1 alone, I don't think there's any other investment we do with that sort of return rate. So that's why it has been in those last 2 reports we've had up to council, it's been suggested that, you know, we've got the criteria now, why don't we formalise that, but just leave it open for people to apply as need be.
So you're going to move, Madam Chair, you're going to move something, are you?
Well, I was open for discussion and thoughts from the committee, yes. But yeah, if that was, you know, a consideration that the committee liked, then yes.
Good.
Rachel.
Well, thank you, James. Thanks for a really comprehensive report. I've got a few other questions of different parts of it, but just on the housing reserve, look, I actually think given the housing issues in Nelson are not going to be reducing. In fact, they've just got quite a bit harder in the last month. I think it would be worth actually just maintaining, doing as you suggested. I think there could be some opportunities that we want to be able to support and we need to be able to be responsive. So at the moment, that seems like the best option. I think thinking about the work that the team's got in front of them, or what will flow through into the next council, they're going to be just as busy as they have been, if not busier, depending on some of the decisions we've got to make. So let's just keep this one live. I would support that.
Thank you. Chanel and then Brian.
I just wondered whether the availability of that fund is communicated to people out there, or is it kind of just something we deal with when people approach the council?
It has been communicated a number of different ways or times. Probably if it's open permanently, then we can then do something quite sort of different and the communication might change. We've certainly let groups know, but also, put it out publicly. So, but I think the first time, again, we had the first time we actually inadvertently had no money in the budget. We had the fund to draw down, of course. So, so there would be a sort of a renewed and a different communication approach to get it out there. Yes. Brian and then Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. Just a question with the going forward. Are we still retaining the view that it's got to be community housing providers are the applicant?
So it is in accordance with the current criteria we have used is for registered community housing providers and or local iwi trusts. And then it goes on to say with a local presence that are well positioned to deliver new affordable housing in Whakatū, Nelson.
So there's no proposal that we alter that. There's no proposal that's changed or extended.
No, because that's what was in line with what we consulted on with the community. So if it was to be changed, So it was very clear that it was so the criteria aligned with what we consulted on with the community.
Yep. Okay. No, I'm happy with that. Leave it.
Thank you. Pete?
Yes, I think just on that note then, Judine, of note the criteria is open to all registered community housing providers and or local iwi trusts. Can you give any commentary on engagement that we've actually had with iwi trusts in this regard, or perhaps Chanel might know? I just wouldn't mind knowing what's happened, if anything.
That's actually why I asked the question. I wondered whether iwi trusts even know that they can access that fund.
I believe there was, I'll go to Lisa to see if she can answer, but I believe there has been some engagement through Gabrielle, but Lisa.
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. The iwi trusts were notified when the phase one was open. I guess the issue is that to make an application to phase one, you really have to be shovel ready. You have to have a site and a proposal, and possibly iwi weren't that shovel ready at that time. I'm wondering if I could also add that when we consulted the community on the housing reserve, it was for, the purpose of it was for social and affordable housing. There wasn't any provider of that was specified as part of that consultation.
Yeah. Yes. But I recall, yes, you're 100% correct. I think when the this was drafted, I think Gabrielle had it sort of legally reviewed just to look at that consistency with, and this was what was delivered. I guess that's why if it was open permanently, that's the catch, is it means you don't have to be ready. That's always that thing with grant funding. If they have that set date, if you're not ready at that date, you can miss out. And you might be just a month shy or something like that. Whereas, having it open permanently would actually support more people being able to access it.
Right. So, Julie, if I could just cut back in, I'd be really interested to see what kind of recommendation you're considering putting forward in this regard. And I guess my point would be that, in the true interest of partnership, it would be really nice to pursue methods that are going to encourage partnership. And if that means that we kind of have to be a little bit more proactive in regards to iwi trusts, so be it. I think that would be really beneficial. And this is not accusing staff of not being proactive in this area at all. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just sort of saying, what are some of the positive things that we can put in place that's going to try and ignite some action in that regard? Because I think we would all agree there's no problem in igniting action from NHT, Nelson Tasman Housing Trust, or Habitat for Humanity. They're keen as mustard. We know that. And I'm not trying to say that iwi trusts aren't keen as mustard, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been sort of overtly expressed. And I'd like to see some action points that might sort of help that along.
Yeah. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, and as I said, I think this is the first step, and then from there we can actually, do more after that. And there are other chips as well, and they just haven't been ready when we've been ready. And so it's first step is about taking some of the pressure off the time frames or those drop dead dates. It's probably that first step. And then, as Chanel said, that communication is then also the next step. Okay, so Rachel.
I think, Judine, just in the course of that conversation, it has occurred to me that I may have an interest in this matter as I'm not sure that I've got a conflict, but I might have an interest as a member of the Marae Committee, and we have got interest in talking with council about it and increasing housing opportunities with the Marae, and have been in discussions with council officers.
I think there would be an interest, not a conflict.
I'm just noting that interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Pete, your hand is still up.
I just like leaving it up. I'll take it down.
Okay. Whatever works best for you.
Hands up.
Okay. Do I have Gail?
Thank you. I wanted you to let your committee go first. Judine, this will be a recommendation to council.
So yes.
Yes.
Yeah, as noted in my report, we don't have decision-making authority. Anything would be a recommendation up to council.
So when it comes up to council, just because I can't recall all the criteria that were given when we signed it out, would you propose that a one-page cover of what the criteria was?
Yeah, so in section 4, I did section 4 and 4.2, I did try and cross-reference what report you could find it in. So it was in that 25 August council report.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if it comes to council on the 22nd of September, there's probably going to be 1,000 pages to read. If there was a quicker reference, I'll just wait because I'm going to ask you another question, but you talk to Dennis first.
Yes, so we can
I
have
know
that
you're good,
come
but
up.
you can't listen to both.
I did. Yes, we can have this. I can talk to the mayor about appending this, or we can send it out via email separately. Robin.
Through the chair, we have the ability to put attachments to recommendations from committees.
Yeah.
That would be
So we can
really
do that.
helpful.
Yeah.
So just before I close off, was there a limit per provider or per year, or was there, so that we don't give all the money to one body? Was there any consideration of that, or is it just
That's part of the
what comes
application
in
process.
at the time?
Yep, that's part of the application process and what comes out. I mean, I think it would be unlikely for any community housing provider or iwi trust to actually have that
All
many
eight million?
projects on the go to be able to do that. But that is part of the applications come to council for decision making, and so that might be something that
Part
is
of what they
taken
look
in
at.
mind.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But then also similarly, it might depend on if they are partnering with someone new, for example, because that's the other opportunity is they may, a CHIP might choose to partner with an iwi trust. And so therefore, if they came up with a different model that delivered, then you'd look at it in that light. So the criteria is more just the key deliverables for us, those nuances. You want to keep it fairly open so you don't, and that was, part of what Gabrielle did when she wrote it is making sure it didn't actually lock out some innovation or some creative thinking or some good partnering.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on the screen? So we is code for Dennis. Welcome, Dennis Bush King. Sorry. Sitting to my right, Dennis Bush King is our new acting GM of Environmental Management. So welcome, Dennis. I have sat beside you at meetings before, but anyway, we won't comment. But yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll have a couple of minute adjournment just so we give our wonderful GAs time to type up the recommendation, and so we'll just adjourn for a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're now back. We've got a couple of draft resolutions, recommendations to council. As I noted in my report, we don't have decision-making power, but we can make recommendations to council. So can Zoom people see the recommendations in one moment? Okay. So they're firstly approving as permanent the housing criteria. It's got the attachment number, but that's the one that came to us in 25 August, and then previously for phase 1, which was 5th of October 2021, and then it's agreeing to leave the fund open. Agrees to leave open the time period for receiving applications. Yeah, so then it's permanently open. Now, this doesn't mean that this has to be the permanent criteria for all time. The next term of council can look at, again, what's working, what's not working, choose to expand or reduce any of the criteria. I guess the key is, as has been, discussed and presented to us by community housing providers, is, just having the criteria set for now is a key step forward, and having it open is a step forward, and certainly anything can be reviewed going forward if it's seen that some people are missing out or that the criteria is restrictive. But Gabrielle did sort of write it trying to keep it as open as possible. But on the back of not having a staff report, I don't think we should be doing wholesale changes, because otherwise I think it would go a step beyond being able to be a recommendation to council. Pete.
Thank you. I can't see it because it's gone away again, but I just, my first question, is Lisa there? I can't quite see.
Yes, she is.
Oh, okay. So, look, I appreciate what you just said, Judine, but is this wording in any way restrictive? Lisa, could you comment on that?
Through the chair, it's a little bit confusing, because I find when I was assessing the applications, it's quite confusing on how phase 1 is written. There's a heading that says evaluation criteria.
Yeah.
And then it says what the objectives are, which is enduring and affordable. I actually think that part of the issue is the way that we've expressed it, the application on the website. But I guess this could be interpreted many ways. So this resolution is we're approving as permanent the housing reserve criteria, which is that it has to be enduring, it has to be affordable housing that's retained over its natural lifetime of 50 years, and it has to be affordable, which means it has to be housing for low to moderate income households. The phase 1 then went on to restrict applications to only community housing providers and iwi, but in my mind, that's not the criteria. That's part of the process. I think maybe it needs clarification, or it could be interpreted in different ways in the future.
Okay, so if I could continue, thanks, Lisa, appreciate that. So, Julian, I'm wondering whether the detail doesn't need to be confirmed as being permanent. It's more that, where we're heading with this. We want this to remain open, correct? That's what we're trying to achieve here.
It is, but we need to have some criteria for which staff can evaluate any applications that come forward, however.
Well, why don't we just say that we want to reaffirm the criteria as opposed to making, because as you say, it's not actually permanent, because the next council could change it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see that. I can't see it again because it's gone off the screen.
Okay. Yeah, reaffirm that still works.
Well, that clearly sets out what we're trying to say here. We reaffirm what we originally set out. We're not specifically going through the criteria bit by bit, reaffirming every single bit. We're reaffirming the thrust of where we're heading, really.
Yeah, and then just take out as permanent. Rachel.
We also changed that word disbursements to grants from the housing reviewed. I think it's future grants from. That's right.
Thank you. Okay, so can Zoom people see that? Yes, you can. Okay.
Well, yeah, I don't want to be pedantic, but we're really reaffirming the housing reserve criteria for successful applications to future grants. Well,
yeah.
Well, all right. It's all right.
Yeah. They're probably extra words. Yep. Okay.
No, that's right. That's good from my perspective. Thanks.
Okay, so the key, I guess, is everyone clear on the intent of what we're recommending to council? So we've used criteria in phase 1 and phase 2, and that has generally served us well. And instead of having sort of set dates, or we will leave the fund open, which is basically sort of how the last one worked, is we will be able to respond to requests as they come to us. Okay, thank you. Right. Yes. Okay, so I'll move these resolutions separately, and then I'll come back to the receiving report. I can do that out of order, can't I? Yep. Okay, so I'm happy to move these resolutions. Do I have someone who's happy to second? Thank you, Mel. Any debate? Rachel.
Just a question, if it's okay, or just on the report. But we're going to do the whole thing.
I was just going to do these resolutions and then come back to the report.
No, I'm all good with those. I'm happy with that, where they are at the moment. But I am interested in actually trying to get some greater flexibility in there in terms of when we can meet the social and affordable and enduring criteria. Then again, as I talked before, we're going to have to be really thinking about how we're going to be delivering that housing, and it may be that there will be ways we can get flexibility and enduring that is not through an iwi trust and not through a chip. So, but I do understand that you want a bit more staff information before you'd be willing to look at that. So thank you.
Okay, so I'll put that resolution, those recommendations to council. All in favour? Aye. Okay, against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so and now we're just back to the chair's report, and Rachel, you had a question.
Thank you, Judine. I just wanted to hear on 5.9 on page 11, you've let us know that Lisa will be at the meeting and she'll be providing us with a verbal update.
Yes, so that'll be under the quarterly report.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, that's all right. I'll wait for that then.
Okay, so Gail.
Judine, I'm speaking to say thank you for your chairing for this committee, because I think this is the opportunity to do it, because you're moving your report, and I think the opportunity should not be missed to say that the way that you've chaired the meetings have been open and welcoming to those that are not on the committee, and you've progressed a lot of business that would not otherwise have been done. And I think that you probably would have progressed more had you had the opportunity. So I just wanted to say thank you for your tenacity and for your efforts that have actually got us as far as they have. And I'm really, really grateful for the way that you have chaired. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Rachel.
Thank you, Judine. Look, I just want to really acknowledge, and look, this is a little bit like Kate's climate change comments the other day. In some ways, you feel like there are whole lots of things that you could have done and you would have wanted to do, and it does require a team of people to get them over the line, and that's something that we just haven't had we had a great team, a small team, but a team that's been stretched on working on multiple projects trying through this period. So I wanted this committee to really focus and accelerate around housing, and while we may not be able to see quite the extent of what we had in mind when we started this, what I do know is that this is leaving an absolutely fantastic platform for the next council, that what will come from this and what's in play at the moment is going to leave a major opportunity to increase housing across our city, particularly in our city centre. So I just want to acknowledge the work you've done. You've got a whole lot of things lined up. I think we've got more coming to the council meeting, and it's not possible without the dedication and energy and passion that comes, with governance support for the staff team. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the resolution recommendation on page 8. Do I have someone happy to second it? Oh, thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
All right.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So we'll go to the quarterly report, and we do have a circulated item in writing, but now I'll hand over to Lisa and to Ellen.
Thank you. So you're wanting us to give you a quick update on the city development section of the quarterly report, is it?
No, so we're now in the quarterly report, and so just your updates on city centre development and on housing.
Oh, I've got it. I'll do housing too. So in the last quarter, the sale of 6 and 8 Churchill Street went through to fruition. There's just one.
Oh, sorry, can you pull the microphone a bit closer forward? Thanks.
In the last quarter, the contract for the sale of 6 and 8 Totara Street was secured, and one condition remains to be satisfied on that by the 20th of September. And a significant amount of work has gone into the negotiations of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund in the city centre, and a report will be coming to council on the 22nd of September in that regard. And also alongside that, a significant amount of work has gone into assisting Kāinga Ora as the developer of 42 Rutherford Street and 69 to 101 Archiles Avenue to go through their internal processes and do some wider consultation to get ready to do an RFP to the market for a formal partnership before the end of the year to supply the affordable housing. Those were the main pieces of work on the housing work stream in the last quarter, and I'll hand over to Alan. And Alan, if you want to see what we wrote in the quarterly report, it's just here.
It's okay. I got it. So with the city centre, work on the stage 1 schematic design options for the Bridge Street Linear Park and the linear active transport corridor is underway. We're probably a month away from getting that work completed. So that will roll over into the new council in terms of updating on that particular activity. Council's transport team and ourselves are developing a proof of concept over this schematic phase to align with the vision that's set forth in Te Aroha Whakatū with regards to Bridge Street. And it's also to help us in our preparations ahead of Kāinga Ora's anticipated development program on the 2 sites in the city centre, as well as the ongoing negotiations on the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. Second piece of activity in the city centre is working with our council property team to ascertain and identify potential properties in the central city suitable for a play area. This was a specific item that was in the 2021-31 LTP. We've been working also with council's parks team. They're supportive of the approach that we're looking at in terms of the criteria that's been developed. We've issued a property brief, and that's actually led to council's successful purchase of the SBL property on Bridge Street. But again, a decision is going to need to be made in the future about the actual use of that site. But we're looking at play within the context of our city center planning, both with Bridge Street and with other activities such as bus network and bus hub. Third area is around the Streets for People kind of funding through resolution from this council for tactical street trials. We got a few currently in discussion. There are 3 in specific, but one of those we're looking to start to work with some stakeholders in the next month to get some direction on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I'm just going to start with a question from me to each of you. What would be your highlight for the 3 years of the piece of work that you're most proud of?
I reckon the highlight of my 14 years at this council would be the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's the adoption of that you guys adopted the plan for our city center, and as the deputy mayor's touched on, a lot of extensive discussion. And I want to point out and recognize Pete in this role with the City Center Working Group, and we did that Streets for People work through the Wakakotahi funding that we actually declined. But we had over 10 meetings with different retail groups and things in that phase that helped us even set up the ability to go out and do a lot of pre-engagement on this. So very proud of this work, and it set us up, I think, for hopefully some successful negotiations, whether it's with IEF or better off funding or other things that might be coming our way that can help us enhance the delivery of our city center.
Thank you. Okay, so opening for questions. Pete was first, and then Rachel, then Matt.
Thanks. Oh,
Yep.
thanks,
yours.
Janine, and thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. And certainly if I am lucky enough to get re-elected, I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to work in this area again, because it certainly is my focus. I just wanted to ask you a question, and maybe I should know the answer to this. The SBL site, was there the funding for that? Did any of that come from our reserves budget, our reserves fund? Or put it another way, where did the funding for that come from? Can you just remind me?
No, I think the property team have a discretionary fund that they draw from on this. We did talk to the parks team around using the reserves fund, but I think that the property team opted for a different fund source on that.
Okay, cool. Well, can I just say, Julian, before we leave this, I'm tremendously proud of the work that staff have done in these areas over the last 3 years. I think it's been exemplary, and of course we could always have done better in some regards, but I think it's moved the city forward just in thinking in so many ways. So I take my hat off to all of the staff involved in all of these areas. I think it's been tremendously exciting 3 years. And I really look forward to the future and what it may hold, given the pathway that has been put in place here. So from me, a very, very big thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Rachel.
I didn't have my hand up, Judine.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said earlier you had a question.
Oh, I was just interested in the update on the housing. So
Okay,
it was
excellent.
very much we've had.
Yep, great. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Judine. Thanks for the report and the update. Just on the bus depot site, the feedback I've had to that, and it's been considerable, has been that it's probably a good place for housing, but not a great place for a playground, because of the common view seems to be it's not big enough and that it's too shaded. Have you been getting that sort of feedback as well, and what do you do with that sort of feedback?
So through the chair, no, I haven't received that feedback. It is a sunny site. It's exposed to the north because of Wakati Square. And again, I think if we have to look at it within the I guess the opportunity of the linear park, it starts to form a much stronger connection and lands that as a really viable site. The criteria that we've developed, there are not. So I think it's also managing expectations. So it's difficult to find a Margaret Mayhew size space in our city center to achieve that type of outcome. So we did look at this within the criteria with the property team to make sure we could accommodate a level of play. And I think it's really important, and we're going to have discussions with the community about what type of play is suitable for our city center. Is this loud, boisterous splash pads, or is it something that's maybe possibly something more flexible for a range of different ages and users, and something that may have a good fit in the city center and therefore could fit on a slightly smaller site. So I think we need to engage on that much further, but we think that particular SBL property could achieve quite a bit of an outcome on that.
Okay, and you have to remind me through the chair, if we, have we ruled out doing a destination playground at Rutherford Park?
So through the chair, our discussions with the parks team is that you kind of have both. You have bigger destination that's right on the fringe, but that there is activity that you can do within the city center that doesn't require, the additional 5 or 10 minute travel to a destination site.
Okay, so we could end up with both.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. And just a comment, I tautoko what Pete said before about the work that the team have done and this committee has done, and other committees related to it. And I feel that the city is on the cusp of something really great and a big step forward. And I really hope that whoever sits around this table after October the 8th understands that, because a lot of work has been done, a lot of thinking has been done, a huge amount of communication has been done with the people of Nelson Whakatū, and we're kind of on the launch pad. So that is a real tribute to the staff and the elected representatives and everyone who's worked with us to get us to the stage. So bring on the future, I say.
Okay, thank you for that. Mel.
Thanks, Judine. Ellen, through you. Ellen, feedback for you too on the play space and the housing for the SBL site. A number of people have said to me, not criticising the play at all, not at all, very happy with it, but would we talk please, Mel, would we talk please about green spaces as well? That came back very strongly, and I thought, how on earth am I going to get this in today? So I'm using this opportunity. So just store that away and thinking about the, thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Rachel.
Speaking to the recommendation. Is we moved and seconded?
There is no resolution. It's a verbal.
We're done. Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
All together. Right, nothing on the supplementary.
We're going to that next.
Okay, I'll wait for the supplementary, Judine.
Okay, actually, status report and then the supplementary.
Okay, multitasking, as you can see.
Okay, so thank you, Alan and Lisa, for joining us at the meeting, and tautoko what people have said, and just further to my chair's report. Thank you so much for all the work you have done. It really has set up our city and the central city and all of the city well for the future. So thank you. So we'll now go to the status report updates on page 14. Michelle Joubert is on Zoom. Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks, Judine.
Thanks, Michelle.
Hello, everyone, again, for those who I saw yesterday. So I'm really relying on Lisa and Alan and Chris, if he's there, to update the committee on the status updates, and I think Dennis will also be able to add some info if he's had a chance to talk to Claire. But if not, I can help where I can.
Thank you very much. Rachel.
Well, thank you. Look, I was in my going through a stack of the council decisions to try and capture things that hadn't made it to a status report. I did come across a resolution which was related to a decision to direct that $50,000 was included in the LTP for City Centre Residential Conversion Fund, and I've never heard anything about it again. Can someone tell me what happened? Did it not make it? Did it get forgotten about? It was an interesting exercise going through all of those pages, actually. I've a few more things that I'll have to bring to some other meetings. Where did this one get to? Did it not get in? Because it was actually one of those ones where it was a decision we made in 22nd of September 2020. And it was a direction, it was to direct that a provisional budget of $50,000 to subsidise regulatory charges be included in the draft LTP years 1-3 for the City Centre Residential Conversion Fund. And it moved by Councillor Fulton, seconded by myself. And it may be that it just exists, but we don't know about it because it's sort of not prominent enough to get to a council agenda. Anyone able to help me out with that? I did send this through before the meeting.
Thank you, Lisa.
Through the chair, yes. So we did prepare, the city development team prepared a report on the City Centre Residential Conversion Fund, and did quite a lot of research to get that up and going and established. there were some difficulties, some unresolved difficulties in how we would dish out that money. And so that report never came to council. The funding and then resourcing got scarce, and I guess it fell down the list of priorities. But the work that has, we're really keen to get that fund established, because I think it is a really good idea for utilising vacant upstairs spaces in the city centre. And the resolution from September apparently was, that resolution would have to have been put into the long-term plan in order for that funding to exist, and that never occurred. So, the funding was lost, and we haven't quite finished the process on how we would allocate that funding.
So that's very disappointing, Lisa, to hear. I kind of go, this is one of the ones, so this is what this is highlighting, is the importance of resolutions being kept in the status report, so that we can make sure that they're actions. So clearly this one wasn't, and that's a matter that we'll have to, we have highlighted before in terms of some gaps that we've got in our systems, because it was resolved actually for that purpose. So it wasn't a noting in a minute, it was a direction as a resolution to avoid the scenario of noting in minutes and things not happening. Because the view, and I think I could speak on behalf of all the members of the committee sitting here, is that it was an area that we felt very strongly about, that there was an opportunity for actually doing that work. And I know the officers, obviously you've started some work on it. Lisa, could you just highlight a little bit what were the issues that stopped that report coming forward? Can you recall what they were? What was it that caused the problem? Well, you might have to say.
Well, there were some issues about first in, first served, how we would control the distribution of the money, whether it had to do with when we wanted to in order for it to be attractive to an applicant, they needed a commitment up front, because the idea was that that fund would be used to offset building consent and resource consent fees, and perhaps fire engineering reports, which are the big things that people highlighted to us were financial barriers. However, there was no way of ensuring, if we offset that funding up front, that the actual housing would be delivered at the end. We weren't able to come up with a satisfactory mechanism that would reduce the risk that we subsidised a building consent, resource consent and fire report, and the conversion never actually took place. So that was part of the issue. I'm sure there would be a solution. At the time, there just was not enough capacity or resource to get our head around that and figure that out.
I'm sure there would be a mechanism for doing that. I'll probably think it up. I'm sitting here, but it just would need to be tested a bit legally. I'm just not sure what we're going to do with it, Judine. In terms of, I'm quite.
Well, okay, so one of the first steps is that, of course, we need to, because I had also, in looking at the status report, and I don't know if they got updated on, I had found some resolutions that weren't put on here as well. And that was only sort of trying to look through. I think, yes, Michelle added them on, didn't you? Those ones I sent you.
Yes, that's right. I think we had, they were just in the wrong place in the system when I was looking for them. But
yes,
but thanks for your help, and we found them and they've been included.
Yeah. Okay. So it needs to be on the status report, but also the 50,000 should still exist in this financial year. No, we put it for 3 years of the LTP. I think the resolution was for 3 years. Yeah, Rachel.
No, this is the dilemma that we've got. Clearly there was an intention to put it on because the officers wrote a report, started doing all the work for it. So that started to make its way through. The question is, was it translated? I'm thinking, the question is, well, you would think so, because you wouldn't start doing the work unless it had actually made its way through into the LTP. So we'll have to do a bit of digging to see whether it actually exists there. Yes. It just may not be, as I said, significant enough to get into some of the financial reporting that we'd see, but I wouldn't have thought the officers would have started writing it without, you know.
Yes, so that's why I would assume the money is there.
Yeah, but Lisa, you may be able to shed some light on that.
Yeah, so through the chair, because we've tried to track down the money before, because there was a time when we were going to revive that report and try again with that conversion fund. And then at that time, the money was gone. So apparently it was a pre-LTP resolution that you made, and it wasn't action for the long-term plan. It should have been included in the long-term plan, but wasn't. So if you wanted to progress that fund now, you would need to pass a resolution for unbudgeted expenditure in the annual plan 22-23. Can you do that now?
22-23. Yep, sorry. Yep. And so how far away is the potential of the criteria, and or are there other councils that have criteria that is being used successfully?
Through the chair, I think it's not that. It's an element of good faith involved in this agreement. It is a grant, or basically an offset of fees as a grant, and I don't think there is any surefire way that you can 100% guarantee that you're going to get the outcome, because all sorts of things could happen. Costs could escalate. The thing could be uneconomic. So I think it's more around the acceptance of that element of risk. And the council's appetite for that.
And just what was the anticipated or considered, because it's only 50,000 in a year, so that wasn't going to like one applicant, was it?
No, we thought we would cap it at 10,000 per applicant, and we based that on, we looked around how many city centre conversions or inquiries we've had about them, and we thought if we achieved 5 per year, that would be pretty
fantastic. Yep. Okay, so 10,000 is low risk for an organisation of this size. Okay, so if council was prepared to accept a level, that level of risk around it, does that make finalising the criteria any easier?
Yeah, I guess, maybe we should have had a workshop on it, so that we could have then brought a report up that with an element of comfort that it was going to be acceptable. So maybe we want to have a workshop with the new council.
Okay. Rachel, have you got thoughts on how it should progress? I'm happy to. Maybe we need a resolution.
It's a decision that came from a council meeting, so I will need to follow that up with Chief Executive. And I probably went subject to the next week not being quite as intense as the last month. I am going to do my very best to do a reasonably comprehensive mayor's report for the council meeting. One of them, probably the 29th, because it'll give me a bit longer to get it written. Will happen that day, and there's quite a few things that I just want to cover off. Then it is going to have to go to the new council, but there are some things that was a particular area, and it's an area that we were responding to because it's being raised consistently by our community, and it's one of the actions, the intensification action plan, to start to look at getting more people living in the city. And it was a training and priority for us. Now, the next council may not have a priority around housing or city centre like Councillor Laurie. I'm really hoping that will be the case, because everything is set up right now. I mean, the launch pad is there and everything's ready to go. So, but obviously that'll be for the new council, but I'll certainly maybe just cover it off there.
Okay, so so there's elements.
I'm sorry to have spent a lot of time in your meeting dealing with this. I did try and get an answer quite outside of the meeting. Wasn't successful.
Okay, so Lisa.
And sorry, through the chair, I just also wanted to add that one of the other actions in the intensification action plan was for us to complete a upstairs city centre conversion guide, which we have completed, and it does go through all the steps and has a little financial business case thing where you can enter your numbers and see if that comes up. So we're just waiting for the launch of the new website, and that will go on there along with another 2 guides that we developed for info.
Lisa, actually, I was just looking for that, because while I was looking for this, I could see some notations about that in the draft annual report. I would love to see that. So would it be possible to send it out to the? I think all the councillors would like to see that. It's something we're really interested in. So would it be possible to get that sent out? And I'm just thinking that I'm not sure how far away the new website is, but maybe we've got some other channels that we could get get that out if it's ready to go, rather than wait. Because honestly, right now we're just everything we can do to try and speed up supply of housing is needed.
Thank you, Matt.
I was just going to say the same thing. I think I get asked that question a lot about what is possible, what isn't possible, how do we find this out? So when we do have that information that's ready to go, it would be really good to make as much noise about it as possible, not only because people want that information, but also because it could potentially inspire people with properties who are thinking about the future to explore that opportunity. So I'm looking forward to it very much.
Thanks. You. Pete.
I just want to point out how brilliant Lisa is, because the upstairs guidance goes through all the steps of what you should do.
Thank you, Pete.
Well, it's been a long day.
You weren't at the landfill meeting this morning.
Right. No, I wasn't.
No. Okay. So, Rachel, you'll follow up through your chair's report and through the status updates to full council, and probably follow up with the CEO just around the processes for resolutions staying within the right area.
Yes, I might put it in my handover report to whoever's going to sit in the hot seat next time.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so are there any further questions on the status report? Otherwise, we've got the recommendation on page 14. Matt?
Mind, through the chair, the Saltwater Creek Way, or the access across that part of town, any news on where that's at?
Through the chair, so that is something we're organizing to meet with some stakeholders to kick off a session probably in third week of October. Right. So that's in process. Obviously, with the recent events, we haven't been doing the door knocking and some of those things, but we're preparing for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so recommendation page 14. So I'm happy to move, seconded by Rachel. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much for that, Michelle. Okay, so now we go to the supplementary agenda item, which is the NPSUD progress update on implementation, and we have Maxine Day with us. Thank you for joining us at the table, Maxine. And over to you.
Tēnā koutou, everybody. This report is an update on how we have progressed in implementing the National Policy Statement for Urban Development. If you'll recall, the NPSUD directs local authorities to undertake a range of actions, all primarily focused on improving the supply of housing. The progress report notes that there have been vast majority of actions have been completed within the timeframes prescribed through the legislation, including the development of the future development strategy, the housing and business assessments, and the plan change to remove the minimum parking requirements. There is one matter where we have not met the timeframe, which is the notification of a plan change to give effect to Policy 5. And those reasons have been set out in the report. Broadly relating to the time taken to respond to new legislation, the need to effectively align with the future development strategy, a number of the sort of staffing constraints that the policy teams had through COVID, and in general constraints on recruiting planning staff, and also then some of the additional work that's been requested from staff through the elected members. I think probably the key element in there is the alignment with the future development strategy. There's really good reasons to make sure that our housing plan change responds to our future development strategy, and that's only really recently been developed. It's far more efficient for us to have gone through that very public-facing process, that strategic process, and then align our zoning and resource management plan after that process. And then in terms of where we go to from here, you're well aware that we have progress the development of the housing plan change. It is sitting there with a workshop to the councillors next week to take them through the vast majority of where that's landed. There have, of course, been a few events that have happened over the past month that are making us look at some of the housing and hazard-related interfaces. And that work is likely to take a few more months. But in the interim, we are still progressing that work at pace, and we'll give you a further update about that at a subsequent meeting. In terms of where we go to with our process of not meeting the deadline, the likely outcomes will report to the ministry. I've already had some discussions with them. And send them a letter basically explaining why we haven't yet met that deadline. In the discussions that I've had with them, they would like us to reconsider the SPP process, that streamlined planning process. And of course, that will be a decision for the new term of council that we will take back to them. The ministry has also offered for Minister Twyford to come down and speak to the council about that SPP process, because the message that I got 2 weeks ago was quite different to the message that I got several months ago. So I think it would probably be very valuable for the minister to come down and us to sort of test some of our concerns around the timeliness and the uncertainties of it potentially getting through the process. And I think I'll probably leave it there and open to questions.
Thank you. That'll be something light and fun for new elected members to get their head around quickly. Great, good. Matt.
Thanks, Judine. Thanks, Maxine. Could you expand a little bit on what you were saying in terms of there being different understandings of what was being discussed?
With the ministry?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, the conversation that we had several months ago with the ministry, and if you recall, I sort of wrote a report about this, was that there was concerns that the broad scale of this plan change, which was a housing and hazards plan change, is much bigger than anything that we put through as an SPP process. They expressed some potential concerns by the minister about the lack of appeal rights that parties would have and whether he'd be comfortable in taking away those appeal rights. There was no certainty about the timeframes for the SPP process, and that sort of no end point for us knowing when that plan change might come through in terms of a hearing or even notification. And the subsequent conversation was along the lines of we would like to help shepherd you through that process in a quick and timely way, and that we will try and help resolve some of the uncertainties. So that conversation is very, very different to the conversation that I had several months ago, and it's clearly, I think, something that the ministry might be trying to make that SPP process a bit more attractive for councils to use going forward.
And through the chair, how significant do you think that shift is potentially for us?
It's subject to what they come down and tell us. It could be quite significant, yes.
So through the chair, potentially good news. Wait, remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah, okay.
Potentially it does offer a pathway of getting the entire plan change through the process faster.
Yep.
Because of course the standard process always runs the risk that you get a large portion of it appealed, and that can drag on for potentially years.
Fast.
Yeah.
Fast sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I think Matt's asked probably the sort of question I was interested. The advice that you've just given us there, Maxine, is very different to the content of the report that was put up when we made the decision whether we go down the Schedule 1 process or the SCP process. And the advice, I understand that, my recollection of the advice was they were very cagey about. I think the next biggest one was the development near Pukeura Bay, which with an iwi trust, which was just a fraction of the scale we're talking about. So, what's changed?
I can't actually answer that, Brian, I'm afraid. I was talking to different people at the ministry, and clearly the minister, having made an offer to come down and speak to you, has jumped on board with this. They are monitoring the implementation of the NPSUD, and in particular councils who are implementing their plan changes. So I think the fact that probably that we haven't met that time frame has, made them ask some questions as to how can we, as quickly as possible, create a more favourable planning environment for housing. So that they're trying to facilitate that, is my understanding.
Okay. I'm almost astounded by the change of tact from MFE. Okay. Matt's asked a lot of the questions I've had, so I'll leave it at that. But the change of response from you're reporting from MFEs, almost 180 degrees.
Ryan, I'll go to Dennis to respond.
I was just going to observe they've got some draft legislation for the replacement RMA, and that basically has a streamlined planning process built into it. So MFE couldn't be inconsistent, could they?
No, I suppose not. Okay. Oh well, there's an offer there. It's okay. There's not a lot I can say.
Rachel.
Look, I think what you're seeing is an iterative process. So Stina said, we've got the stream of work coming now around the Natural Built Environment Act and the Spatial Planning Act, and there's been started to be that alignment that's going on between what is existing legislation, what does future legislation look like, and yes, they need to be aligned. So I think MFE have been reflecting on that, and certainly through the work that's been going on with the local government, central government working group process, that's been a subject of discussion, and there have been other councils that have been in a similar position to us, where they could see opportunities to make this work better for the local government sector, and the minister is very, very motivated to support what will work for the local government sector, which is great. So I think council should feel very positive about that. Welcome the opportunity when he comes down to the next council to work alongside closely with the tools that may be available and make sure they work for our community. So it's really good news, and it's a sign that it's a very positive sign, because what it's starting to see is that thinking going on that needs to happen around what you do for transitional periods when you've got existing legislation and new legislation. So the more that lines up, the better it will be for Nelson, the better it will be for the local government sector. So it's good progress, I think, over the last few months. There has been some direct engagement that's been going on to try and get that alignment to happen across different parts of the local government sector.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on the report? Otherwise, we've got the recommendations on page 4.
I'll have to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moved by Brian, seconded by Mel. Any debate? I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. I think, yes, that was the last item on our agenda. So just thank you once again to all the members of the committee, but also the broader members of council for supporting the kaupapa of this subcommittee. And we'll close with Tuia. Tuia ki roha, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia te hera tangata, ka ronga te po, ka ronga te ao, homie, kuie, ta ie. Kia ora. Thank you everybody for your attendance. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Judine. See you.